One peaceful morning, Gloria Thomas stood by her window, holding a warm cup of tea in her hands. The soft sunlight touched her face, and for the first time in many years, she felt truly at peace. The room around her was quiet, filled with books, notes, and a few gifts from people who had been touched by her story. Her life had changed in ways she never expected, and yet she remained the same, Gloria, humble, thoughtful, full of quiet wisdom. It had been several months since the day in the diner, the day that had quietly turned her world upside down. Not with loud noise or flashing lights, but with one moment of truth and one young woman's voice, Gloria's story had continued to spread, not as a tale of pity, but as one of hope and dignity. Her speeches were shared across the country, name appeared in articles and interviews. But what mattered most to her wasn't fame. It was the way people were starting to see others differently. One afternoon, the same journalist who had filmed the original video visited Gloria again. This time not to ask questions, but to say thank you. You didn't just speak up for yourself, the journalist said. You gave a voice to people who are often forgotten. Gloria smiled. Sometimes we don't need to speak loudly. We just need to speak kindly. The journalist left with tears in her eyes. Soon after, Gloria received a letter from a high school teacher in another state. The students had read about her story in class and written essays about dignity, kindness, and not judging others by appearance. The teacher included a few of the essays with the letter. Gloria read each one slowly, wiping away quiet tears as she turned the pages. These were young hearts learning early what many adults had forgotten. Another letter came from a woman who had once been a single mother, struggling to find legal help. I never got to thank you, the letter said, but you stood beside me when no one else would. My daughter is now a nurse, and we still talk about you. I saw the video, and I cried. Thank you for showing the world who you really are. Each letter reminded Gloria that her life had never been about fame or awards. It had always been about people, one person at a time. As her health improved, Gloria took on a small role. At the nonprofit that had helped her, she didn't want a high position or an office. She simply offered to talk to those who were struggling, to sit with them, listen, and remind them they still mattered. She met veterans, single mothers, former teachers, and young people lost in hard times. Some of them recognized her. Didn't, but all of them felt her warmth. She greeted each person with the same respect she once gave to clients in the courtroom. One young man, barely out of his teens, told her, I made mistakes. I don't think I can start again. Gloria looked him in the eyes and said gently, everyone can start again. Even the strongest buildings need repairs sometimes. Slowly, a new community began to form around her. People who had once given up started hoping again. And those who had never noticed others began to look more carefully at the world around them. The city council, hearing how much Gloria had inspired the town, invited her to speak at a special community event. They wanted to honor her not just for her past, but for her present, for reminding people of the values they had forgotten. The night of the event, the town hall was filled with people, young and old, students and workers, families and neighbors. Some had never met Gloria, but they knew her story. Others had once passed her on the street without a second glance. Now they stood to applaud her. As she stepped onto the stage, the crowd stood in silence, waiting. Gloria took a breath and began. I don't stand here because I was famous once. I don't stand here because a video went viral. I stand here because someone chose to see me. That one choice changed everything. She paused. Maya didn't know my full story when she stood up for me. She only remembered how I made her feel years ago, heard, seen, valued. And that's the lesson. We don't have to know everything about someone to treat them with respect. She looked around the room and smiled. I lost many things in my life, my husband, my home, my career, but I never lost my dignity, and I never stopped being me. You see, no matter how far we fall, as long as we remember who we are, we can rise again. The room filled with soft claps, then grew louder until everyone stood again. Not because she was famous, but because she had reminded them of something beautiful and true. Maya, sitting in the front row, wiped her tears. After the event, she hugged Gloria tightly. "You changed me," she said. Gloria held her close. "And you saved me." Later that week, a publishing house agreed to print Gloria's memoir. The title was simple, just like her message. "Do you know who I am?" Inside, it wasn't filled with courtroom drama or big achievements. It was filled with moments. Moments of kindness, pain, resilience, and quiet courage. The book became a tool in classrooms, community centers, and even shelters. It wasn't just a story. It was a reminder that every person carries value, no matter their circumstances. Years passed, and Gloria aged gracefully. She walked with a cane, her hair now fully white, but her spirit just as strong. She still visited the university once a month. Students looked forward to her talks not because she was famous, but because she listened, really listened. She often said, "The most powerful thing you can say to someone is, 'I see you,' and that became her legacy. She wasn't remembered as just a lawyer or a homeless woman or a viral story. She was remembered as a woman who lived with grace, who rose from pain with dignity, and who showed the world that no one is ever truly invisible as long as someone chooses to look." In the final chapter of her life, Gloria rested with peace in her heart, knowing she had given the world something it needed, a gentle reminder to treat every soul with care, because the truth was never complicated, it was always simple. In the weeks that followed Gloria's speech at the university, her life slowly began to change, not overnight, not in a grand way, but in small, meaningful steps. She moved into a simple apartment arranged by the local nonprofit. It had one bedroom, a small kitchen, and a large window that let in the morning sun. For Gloria, it felt like a palace compared to the benches and shelters she had known for so long. She kept the space neat, just like she used to in her younger days. Bookshelves stood near her bed, filled with old law books that someone had donated after hearing her story. Maya visited her often. Sometimes they talked about the past, but more often they talked about the future. Maya was now in her final year of college and planning to apply to law school. She had decided not just to become a lawyer, but to walk a path similar to Gloria's, one of service and justice. "Do you think I'll be ready?" Maya asked one afternoon, as they sat on Gloria's small porch, watching birds flutter by. Gloria smiled. "You're already ready. You have something that can't be taught in books: courage." Their friendship had grown into something deeper. Gloria, who once had no family left, now felt as if she had a daughter. And Maya, who had grown up without her grandmother, often said Gloria reminded her of the stories her mother used to tell, of strong women who never gave up, even when the world turned its back. Meanwhile, the video from the diner continued to spread. More media outlets reached out, hoping for interviews. Gloria agreed to a few, but chose her words carefully. She didn't want the spotlight for attention. She wanted it to make a difference. In one interview, she said, "I don't want people to feel sorry for me. I want them to think. The way we treat people says more about us than it does about them." That message touched people. It wasn't loud or angry. It was honest and gentle, and that made it powerful. The diner where the incident happened also felt the effects. At first, the manager had been defensive, claiming he was just doing his job. But as more people reacted, and as he saw the calm dignity with which Gloria handled the attention, he began to reflect. He reached out to Gloria through Maya and asked to meet. Gloria was unsure at first, but agreed. They met in a quiet park. Near the diner, the manager looked nervous. He had brought a small box of pastries as a peace offering. "I want to say I'm sorry," he said, "not because the internet made me, but because I truly am. I judged you. I made a mistake. I hope you'll forgive me." Gloria looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Thank you for saying that. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after." The manager, moved by her kindness, decided to do more. He renamed one of the diner's scholarships for local high school students in Gloria's honor. It would now be called the Gloria Thomas Opportunity Fund, and it would help students who came from underprivileged backgrounds pursue college education. When Gloria heard about it, she was quiet for a moment, then said softly, That means more than any apology. Soon after, the university that hosted her talk invited her to become a guest lecturer. Once a month, she would sit with students and talk about the real world, not just courtrooms and laws, but people. She spoke about fairness, about courage, about listening before judging. Her sessions became the most attended on campus. Even students who didn't study law came just to hear her speak. At one of the lectures, a young man stood up and asked, "Miss Thomas, what was the hardest part of losing everything?" Gloria thought for a moment before replying. "The silence," she said. "When I was walking the streets, no one looked me in the eye. No one asked my name. It wasn't hunger or cold that hurt the most. It was feeling invisible." That answer stayed with everyone in the room. Inspired by her words, a student group began a new project. They made small cards that said, "I see you. I hear you. You matter." They handed them out to people experiencing homelessness in the city. They also organized food drives and shelter support. Gloria's story had done more than touch hearts. It had sparked action. One day, as she was walking out of the university building, a young boy approached her. He was about 12, holding his mother's hand. He looked up at her with wide eyes. "Are you the lady from the video?" he asked. Gloria bent down to his level. "Yes, I am." "My mom said you were very brave," he said. "I want to be brave too." Gloria smiled. "You already are. Saying kind things takes a brave heart." His mother thanked Gloria, tears in her eyes. "You gave me a reason to talk to my son about how we treat others," she said. Gloria's days were now filled with purpose. She wasn't rich in money, but her heart was full. And in her small apartment, surrounded by notes, books, and letters from people across the country, she began to write again. Not legal arguments, but stories. Stories about her life, about hope, about second chances. Maya encouraged her to turn them into a book. "The world needs your voice," she said. And so Gloria began her memoir, page by page. She didn't focus only on the painful moments. She wrote about her parents' strength, her husband's laughter, her favorite clients, the joy of helping someone get justice. She wrote about the bench she used to sleep on, and the warmth of a stranger's smile on a cold night. But most of all, she wrote about dignity, how it can't be taken by poverty or age or appearance. Dignity lives in how we treat each other, and how we remember people's names, and how we choose to see them, even when the world walks past. As the seasons changed and spring turned to summer, Gloria's life settled into a peaceful rhythm. She still walked slowly, still kept her voice gentle, but her steps were no longer heavy with shame. They were full of quiet strength. She had once been forgotten. Now, she was remembered not for the title before her name, but for the kindness in her spirit and the wisdom in her eyes. Would you like me to continue with part 5? The next morning, the sun rose gently over the small town. But inside the hearts of many, something had shifted overnight. The video of Gloria Thomas at the diner had been uploaded by a local journalist who had been quietly observing the incident. She hadn't planned to share it at first, but after learning who Gloria was, she felt the world needed to see what had happened. Not to cause drama, but to start a conversation. The video showed Gloria sitting calmly, asking for water and being approached by the police. It captured the moment she asked, "Do you know who I am?" And Maya stepping in to reveal her identity. It ended with Gloria leaving quietly, dignity still shining in her eyes. By afternoon, the video had reached thousands of views. Comments poured in, many shocked that someone as respected as Gloria had been treated so poorly. People shared stories of how Gloria had once helped them or their loved ones. Some posted old photos of her from newspaper articles, law conferences, and civil rights marches. Others expressed guilt and sadness, realizing how often they might have judged someone simply by their appearance. The police department, too, was facing questions. Though the officers had not used force or unkind words, many people asked why. They had responded so quickly to a call about someone who wasn't causing harm. The diner's manager also received backlash for calling the police at all. Messages flooded the diner's social media pages, and customers began canceling reservations. Inside the diner, The manager sat with his head in his hands. He had not expected any of this. "I didn't mean any harm," he told his staff. "Just wanted to keep things peaceful." But one of the waiters replied gently, "Sir, peace doesn't come from pushing people out. It comes from understanding why they're there." Maya, meanwhile, was overwhelmed. She hadn't expected her small act of speaking up to create such a wave. But she also felt something stronger than nerves. She felt purpose. For the first time, she understood what Gloria had meant in her speech 2 years ago. Standing up for what's right often starts with a small moment, one voice saying, "This isn't okay." Gloria, unaware of the growing attention, spent the morning at the shelter where she was staying. She was given fresh clothes, a warm meal, and a quiet room to rest. She didn't use the internet, so she didn't see the video or the comments. She only noticed something was different when people began stopping her on the street. Softly, kindly. "Are you Miss Thomas? You helped my brother years ago?" "Thank you. I'm so sorry for how they treated you." Gloria smiled, politely, but felt uneasy. She had spent years trying to disappear, to live quietly without being recognized. Now, she felt like the world was watching again, and she didn't know if she was ready for that. Later that day, Maya visited her again. She brought coffee and sat with her on the porch of the shelter. "Everyone's talking about you," Maya said softly. "The video went viral. People are shocked. Some are trying to make things right." Gloria sipped her coffee quietly. "I never wanted to be a symbol," she said. "I just wanted to rest for a while." Maya nodded. "I know, but maybe this is your chance to speak again, not in a courtroom, but in the hearts of people." That evening, Gloria received a call from a local university. They were holding a seminar on race, identity, and social justice. The dean, who had known her from past events, asked if she would be willing to come and speak. At first, Gloria hesitated. She hadn't stood in front of an audience in years. Her suits were gone, her notes long packed away. But Maya gently placed her hand on Gloria's and said, "I'll be there with you." After some thought, Gloria agreed. The next week, the auditorium was filled with students, teachers, and community members. The lights dimmed, and Gloria walked slowly to the stage. She wasn't wearing anything fancy, just a simple dress and comfortable shoes. When she stood at the podium, the room went silent. She looked out at the faces before her and began, "I never planned to speak again, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I thought the world had stopped listening. But last week, I was reminded that even a quiet voice still matters." She shared her journey, her rise as a lawyer, the cases she had fought, the people she had helped. Then she spoke of her fall, the loss of her husband, the betrayal by someone she trusted, the slow and painful journey into homelessness. "But I never lost myself," she said. "I never stopped being who I was. The world just stopped seeing me." She paused and looked around the room. "You see, dignity doesn't come from clothes or money. It comes from how we treat each other when no one is watching. People at that diner judged me. But one young woman remembered me not because I was important, but because I once made her feel seen." She pointed to Maya, who was sitting in the front row with tears in her eyes. "And that," Gloria said, "is how we change the world. Not through power or fame, but through kindness and memory." The room erupted in applause. Some stood, some cried. Gloria bowed her head gently and stepped back from the microphone. That night, the university shared her speech online. It reached people across the country. News stations picked it up. Old friends and colleagues called, offering support, money, and help. But Gloria accepted only what she needed. She didn't want to be rescued. She wanted to rebuild with dignity. One of her former colleagues, now working in Washington, offered to turn her life story into a book. Another proposed a scholarship in her name to support young law students from humble backgrounds. Gloria didn't say yes to everything. She chose carefully. But she did agree to let Maya record her story, piece by piece, to share with future generations. And so, a woman once forgotten became remembered again, not for the trials she won, but for the quiet strength she carried through life's hardest seasons. Would you like me to continue with part 4? Many years before Gloria Thomas became just another face on the streets, she was a name that held weight in courtrooms and classrooms. People used to stand when she walked into a room. Her voice had power. Her words had purpose. She had defended men and women who had been wrongly accused. She had stood in front of judges, juries, and lawmakers, fighting for justice. She was not just a lawyer, she was a symbol of hope, especially for people who had been ignored or mistreated because of the color of their skin. Gloria was born and raised in Alabama during a time when racism was still thick in the air. Her parents were humble people. Her father worked as a janitor in a courthouse, and her mother cleaned homes for a living. But they believed in education. They believed in hard work. And most of all, they believed in Gloria. They saved every penny to help her go to college. Gloria studied with determination and became the first in her family to earn a law degree. She didn't take easy jobs. She chose to represent people who couldn't afford fancy lawyers, people who had been accused without real evidence, people whose voices were too quiet to be heard. She worked late nights, read every file, and asked the hard questions. Her cases made headlines, especially when she helped free 3 young men who had spent years in prison for a crime they didn't commit. Gloria also gave talks at schools and community centers. She would walk into crowded auditoriums, wearing her neat suits and glasses, and tell young people, "Don't ever let anyone tell you you don't belong in the room." Her words inspired many, including a young girl named Maya, who had listened to her at a high school event just 2 years before the diner incident. But life is not always fair, even to those who fight for fairness. After years of helping others, Gloria's own life began to fall apart. It started when her husband, Charles, was killed in a car accident. He had been her rock, her biggest supporter. They had no children, so when he was gone, she felt truly alone for the first time in her life. Then came a business investment that turned out to be a scam. Gloria had trusted someone who took all her savings and disappeared. She tried to fight back through legal means, but even she, with all her experience, couldn't recover the money. Soon after, her health began to decline. She developed chronic pain in her back and legs. She had to stop taking on new cases. Bills piled up. With no close family, no steady income, and no support, Gloria lost her apartment. She tried shelters, then moved from city to city, never staying too long in one place. Pride kept her from reaching out to old friends or colleagues. She didn't want their pity. She told herself she just needed some time to figure things out. But days turned into months. Months turned into years. Even during her hardest times, Gloria never lost her calm nature. She always tried to be kind. She read newspapers when she could, visited libraries when allowed, and helped others on the streets who were even worse off than she was. She kept a small notebook in her bag where she wrote down ideas, poems, and thoughts that came to her during lonely nights. On the day of the diner incident, Gloria had been thinking of her parents. She missed them deeply. She remembered how they taught her to stay strong and never raise her voice unless it was to help someone else. That's why, even when 2 officers stood over her with firm expressions, she didn't show fear. She looked them in the eye and asked a simple question. "Do you know who I am?" When Maya recognized her, it felt like a light had broken through the clouds. It was the first time in years someone had seen her, truly seen her, for more than just her worn clothes or tired face. After leaving the diner that night, Gloria found a safe place to rest. Akea had quietly followed her and handed her a warm sandwich and a clean blanket. Gloria accepted both with gratitude. She didn't ask Maya to stay, but the young woman sat beside her anyway, talking about school and her dreams of becoming a lawyer. "I remember your speech," Maya said. "You made me believe I could do it. You said the law is a tool, not a weapon. That always stuck with me." Gloria smiled. "I'm glad someone listened." Over the next few days, Maya couldn't stop thinking about Gloria. She told her professor, who then contacted others in the legal field. Soon, people who had once worked with Gloria were reaching out. They were shocked to hear where she had ended up. Some had assumed she had retired quietly. Others thought she had moved to another country. No one had expected she was struggling like this. A former colleague, now a judge, offered to help. A local nonprofit that assisted unhoused individuals reached out and offered her a private room. and medical help. At first, Gloria was hesitant. She had gotten used to living on her own terms. But Maya gently said, "You helped so many people. Now let us help you." Gloria finally agreed, but with one condition: she didn't want special treatment. She wanted to rebuild her life slowly with dignity. The nonprofit respected her wishes and provided support quietly, without putting her in the spotlight. But the world had already noticed. The video from the diner had been shared online. People watched in silence as Gloria, once a powerful attorney, sat quietly in a booth, treated like she was invisible, until someone finally remembered her name. Comments flooded in, some in shock, others in support. She was my aunt's lawyer. She saved our family. She spoke at my graduation. I still remember her words. How could this happen to someone like her? In a world full of noise, Gloria's quiet strength spoke louder than any headline. Meanwhile, Maya kept visiting her. They formed a bond, not just student and mentor, but two women from different generations, connected by the belief that dignity should not be based on appearance or wealth. One afternoon, while sitting on a park bench together, Maya asked, "Why didn't you ever ask anyone for help?" Gloria looked at the trees swaying in the breeze and replied, "I think I forgot how." Maya nodded and whispered, then, "I'm glad I remembered for you." That moment stayed in both their hearts. Sometimes it only takes one person to remind you who you really are, and sometimes that person is someone you inspired long ago. Would you like me to continue with part 3? Many years before Gloria Thomas became just another face on the streets, she was a name that held weight in courtrooms and classrooms. People used to stand when she walked into a room. Her voice had power. Her words had purpose. She had defended men and women who had been wrongly accused. She had stood in front of judges, juries, and lawmakers, fighting for justice. She was not just a lawyer, she was a symbol of hope, especially for people who had been ignored or mistreated because of the color of their skin. Gloria was born and raised in Alabama during a time when racism was still thick in the air. Parents were humble people. Her father worked as a janitor in a courthouse, and her mother cleaned homes for a living. But they believed in education. They believed in hard work. And most of all, they believed in Gloria. They saved every penny to help her go to college. Gloria studied with determination and became the first in her family to earn a law degree. She didn't take easy jobs. She chose to represent people who couldn't afford fancy lawyers, people who had been accused without real evidence, people whose voices were too quiet to be heard. She worked late nights, read every file, and asked the hard questions. Her cases made headlines, especially when she helped free 3 young men who had spent years in prison for a crime they didn't commit. Gloria also gave talks at schools and community centers. She would walk into crowded auditoriums, wearing her neat suits and glasses, and tell young people, "Don't ever let anyone tell you you don't belong in the room." Her words inspired many, including a young girl named Maya, who had listened to her at a high school event just 2 years before the diner incident. But life is not always fair, even to those who fight for fairness. After years of helping others, Gloria's own life began to fall apart. It started when her husband, Charles, was killed in a car accident. He had been her rock, her biggest supporter. They had no children, so when he was gone, she felt truly alone for the first time in her life. Then came a business investment that turned out to be a scam. Gloria had trusted someone who took all her savings and disappeared. She tried to fight back through legal means, but even she, with all her experience, couldn't recover the money. Soon after, her health began to decline. She developed chronic pain in her back and legs. She had to stop taking on new cases. Bills piled up. With no close family, no steady income, and no support, Gloria lost her apartment. She tried shelters, then moved from city to city, never staying too long in one place. Pride kept her from reaching out to old friends or colleagues. She didn't want their pity. She told herself she just needed some time to figure things out. But days turned into months. Months turned into years. Even during her hardest times, Gloria never lost her calm nature. She always tried to be kind. She read newspapers when she could, visited libraries when allowed, and helped others on the streets who were even worse off than she was. She kept a small notebook in her bag where she wrote down ideas, poems, and thoughts that came to her during lonely nights. On the day of the diner incident, Gloria had been thinking of her parents. She missed them deeply. She remembered how they taught her to stay strong and never raise her voice unless it was to help someone else. That's why, even when two officers stood over her with firm expressions, she didn't show fear. It was a cold, rainy night in a small town in Georgia. The roads were nearly empty and most people were either at home or tucked into warm beds. But for Gloria Thomas, there was no home to return to, no warm bed waiting. She had spent the past few years living wherever she could, under bridges and parks, on buses. She was homeless, but that wasn't her full story that night. Soaked from the rain and tired from walking, Gloria saw a soft yellow light shining through the windows of a 24-hour diner. Her feet ached, her coat was thin, and her hands trembled. From the cold, she quietly opened the door and stepped inside. The warm air hit her face like a soft hug. Inside, a few late-night customers sipped coffee and chatted softly. A waitress behind the counter looked up and paused when she saw Gloria. Gloria didn't make a scene. She walked slowly to the corner booth, far from others, and sat down. She placed her large worn bag beside her and folded her hands neatly on the table. When the waitress walked over, Gloria smiled gently and asked, "May I have a glass of water, please?" The waitress hesitated. She looked Gloria up and down, the old boots, the messy hair, the damp coat. She didn't say anything rude, but her eyes showed discomfort. "Just water?" she asked. Gloria nodded. "Yes, just water." The waitress left and came back with a small glass. She placed it down without a word and walked away. Gloria sipped slowly, thankful for something warm and dry at last. She wasn't asking for much, just a few moments of peace. But others in the diner began to notice her presence. Some whispered. A man near the counter wrinkled his nose and muttered something to his wife. Another customer waved the manager over and said something in a low voice. The manager, a man in his 50s, with slicked back hair and a neatly ironed shirt, glanced over at Gloria. He frowned, then sighed. He didn't want trouble in his diner. He picked up the phone and quietly called the police, explaining that a homeless woman was inside, making customers uncomfortable. He didn't say she was doing anything wrong, because she wasn't, but he felt pressure to act. 15 minutes later, 2 white police officers arrived. Their shoes echoed on the tile floor as they entered. The diner grew quiet. Everyone turned to look. The officers walked toward Gloria's booth. Gloria looked up at them with calm eyes. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't move. She simply said, "Is there a problem, officers?" One officer replied, "Ma'am, the manager called. He wants you to leave. Says customers feel uneasy." "I see," Gloria said softly. She reached down slowly and picked up her bag. Then she looked up again and added, "Do you know who I am?" The officers paused. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't proud. It was peaceful, but there was something strong underneath it. They looked at her, confused. To them, she was just a homeless woman, someone forgotten by the world. One of the officers gently touched her arm. "Ma'am, we're not trying to hurt you. We just need you to leave the premises." Just then, a young woman from behind the counter stood up. Her name was Maya, a college student working part-time at the diner to pay her tuition. She had been silently watching everything, her eyes growing wide the moment Gloria spoke those words. "Do you know who I am?" Maya stepped forward quickly. "Wait, I think I know who she is," she said. The officers and manager turned to look at her. Maya grabbed her phone and started typing quickly. She pulled up an old article, a photo of a smiling, proud black woman standing in a courtroom, holding a law book. The name beneath it said Gloria Thomas, civil rights attorney and speaker. "This is her," Maya said, holding out the phone. "She's not just some random person. She used to be a lawyer, a really respected one. I remember she gave a talk at my school 2 years ago." The officers leaned in, looking at the photo, then back at Gloria. The resemblance was clear. Though now older, more tired, and worn by life, it was still her. The manager looked uncomfortable. The other customers who had been whispering fell silent. "Is this true?" the officer asked Gloria gently. Gloria nodded. "Yes, that was me." One of the officers blinked. "Why didn't you say anything?" "I didn't think it would matter," Gloria said. "People usually don't care who you are when you look like me." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then one officer slowly took a step back. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. We didn't know. You're not in trouble. You can stay." Gloria smiled softly. "Thank you. Maybe I'll go anyway." As she stood up, Maya quickly moved forward. "Please don't go. Let me get you something warm to eat. On me." The manager, now embarrassed, cleared his throat. "Yes, please, stay. Dinner is free. I apologize." But Gloria shook her head. "It's all right. I came in here for peace, not pity. I got what I needed." Maya followed her out the door, holding an umbrella over her head. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the pavement was still wet. "It's Thomas," Maya said. "If you ever need help, if you just want to talk, I'd really like that." Gloria looked at her and smiled, a real smile this time. "Thank you, Maya. Maybe I'll take you up on that." As Gloria walked away into the night, Maya stood watching her, heart full of emotions. She had just witnessed something powerful. The world saw a tired, homeless woman, but Maya had seen past the surface. Now others had to dot inside the diner. The mood had changed. The customers were no longer whispering. They were thinking, quietly, deeply, and the officers, still standing by the door, looked at each other with expressions they couldn't quite explain, something between guilt and respect, that night. Gloria reminded everyone in that small diner of a truth they had forgotten. Every person has a story. And not every story can be read by looking at someone's clothes or hair or shoes. Sometimes the person you think has nothing once stood for everything. Would you like me to continue with part 2?